Okay, so a while back, I reviewed the PlayStation Portable. And while it had issues with me, I absolutely loved that system. It's a great little handheld system. And despite its faults, it had some pros to it. Like, I really liked that all of the UMD discs had like a little plastic covering on it. To this day, they're all still in pretty good condition because the little plastic cases took the brunt of all damage to the discs. So I absolutely love that about it. It did get a little noisy, but for a portable that came out in the early 2000s, pretty good job. And then the PlayStation Vita came out in 2012, and like back then, when I looked at that, it's like there is no way in hell I am going to be able to get a PlayStation Vita. And I mean, just looking at the marketing campaign for it, looking at all the things it was offering, and then looking at the price point, it's like, yeah, I have a better chance getting like a PS3 and a 360 than I do getting a Vita. Especially since so much about it was expensive. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but then, like a decade later, 2023, I'm looking around online, and it's like, you know what? I've always kind of avoided the Vita, but I decided in 2023 to get a PlayStation Vita. And honestly, I've been having a lot of fun with this thing. So yeah, let's get into it. So, I got a PS Vita. But you're probably asking, but why?
But why?
Why would you get a Vita in 2023? Most people in 2023 get a Switch. You know, a Nintendo Switch. And, like, the thing with the Nintendo Switch is, yes, a Nintendo Switch is really awesome. And I think it's a cool system. But the thing is, all the stuff that's exclusive for the Switch, for me, doesn't justify spending the money on a Switch to play a handful of games. I'm not really into Zelda, not really into Mario, not really into Kirby, not really into Pokemon anymore. So, like, there's Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, and Bayonetta, and, like, for the exclusives, that's it. And for the third-party support on the Switch, it's freaking awesome. But the thing is, all the amazing third-party games that they have on the Switch, I have on the Xbox Series X or the PS5 running at higher resolution frame rates and graphics, and so one would make the argument, yeah, but you can play it portably. I'm not really a portable gamer. But with the PlayStation Vita, there was a couple of games on the Vita that I always wanted to play. Games like Uncharted Golden Abyss, Killzone Mercenary, Resistance Burning Skies. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I love the Resistance series. I've always wanted to play it. And so there were games on the Vita. It's like, man, I've always wanted to play that. And I just always have been like procrastinating on the Vita because usually it's pretty expensive and pricey. However, recently it came to light that there were things you could do to mitigate the cost of a Vita. But before I get to that, let's talk about all the things that this system does. And so yeah, it has a nice little selection of Vita games on here. You have stuff like the Sly Cooper trilogy, the Ratchet and Clank trilogy, Final Fantasy X and X2, God of War 1 and 2. There's about like 16 PS2 games that were like officially released for this handheld, so that's kind of cool. And then you got stuff like Soul Sacrifice, you got, The Wolf Among Us, Unit 13, Unfinished Wrong, Wipeout. There's a lot of stuff on here. Persona 4 was like one of the highest selling games on the system. There's the 2 Rayman games, Resident Evil Revelations 2. There is a nice selection of Vita games on here. But also, it's important to point out that if you're really into all things Japanese, you'll want to get this thing. Because this thing is really fucking Japanese. I cannot stress that enough. Like, my extent of, Japanese culture that I'm a fan of is, Ghost of Tsushima, and maybe one day I might get a nice quality samurai sword. And that is it for my, infatuation with all things Japan. I guess you could count Last Samurai in that list, but, I'm not that big of a fan of Japanese culture or whatnot. But, people who are obsessed about anime, Japanese culture, and I'm talking about the diehard freaks, the people who have 7 different kimonos, they got 5 different samurai swords, and they even have a little, one of those, dirt rake gardens in their kitchen. You guys are going to fucking love this thing. Because unlike other game systems like the PlayStation 3, the PS4, the PS1, the PS5, where there's a healthy amount of games on the market that came out exclusively from Japan, for Japan, and whatnot. When it comes to those consoles, it's about maybe 30% of the game library, sometimes 40%, depending on how big it was in Japan. But on this little sucker, it's 90% of the game library are Japanese titles, and titles that released exclusively in Japan. Because when you look at the numbers, they only sold about 2 million of these units in the West, but they sold 14 million of these in Japan. So this model is actually a Japanese model, because I couldn't find an American model that was super cheap, but I found this one pretty affordable online. Guy gave me a great deal, and yeah, it kind of sucks because in Japan, the circle is the ender and the X is back, and in the West, it's the other way around. So that was a little confusing for the first couple of days of using this, but no, once you get used to it, it's fine. You don't notice, especially if you're playing American games on here, since this is a region-free system. I didn't have to get exclusively Japanese games, so that was nice. Once you start playing American games, the X is enter and the circle is back in the game, so that's nice. But yeah, so if you're into anime, you're into all things Japanese, you are going to fucking love this. You could get all the Persona games except for 5 on this little system. You could get every Final Fantasy on this system, with the exception of 11 onwards. You can get everything up to 10, plus all the spin-off games, so that's over 15 Final Fantasy games. Not to mention all the Japanese digital novels you could get. There is so much Japanese content you could get for this, and a lot of that stuff I now named, Persona and Final Fantasy, that's Japanese games that were released for Western audiences. I'm talking about hardcore Japanese only games you can get for this little sucker. And just on another note, I'm actually really surprised how many games that are available on here wound up for the Switch. I'm not talking about the big AAA titles, but a lot of the indie games, when I was researching this system, it's okay, Dungeon Crawler EX, and when I was typing it into search engine, it's would you like the Vita version or the Switch version? And it's a remarkable amount of Vita games got ported over to the Switch, which I kind of find funny, because the Switch is kind of they took all the best ideas out of this and applied it to their console, which, power to them. I'm not saying how dare they. That's what I would do. And then on another note, the backwards compatibility for this system is really freaking impressive. So, like I said earlier, you can play up to like 16 PlayStation 2 games on this, but you can also play the entire library of Vita games, and then you can play most PlayStation Portable games. I would say like 95% of PlayStation Portable games you can get digitally for this system. There's a couple that aren't available on the digital marketplace anymore, especially like some of the superhero license games. There are ways you can get those, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but like through the official PlayStation Store, which is still open at time of this recording. It may not be by the time you're watching this, but it's still open. You could get like 95% of PlayStation Portable games on this system. So this isn't just a PS Vita, it's also a PSP, and the PSP had some truly wonderful games on that system. And so that was another plus there. But also, you could play an insane amount of PlayStation 1 games on this system. Games like Tekken, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill. I mean, if you can think of a PS1 game that's available on the marketplace, this will play it. If you do some other like non-legitimate way means, you can get any PS1 game to play on this. More on that a little bit. But no, the legal backwards compatible options on here are impressive. So if you're just playing a game this to just play without doing anything specific to the system, you're gonna get access to some really nice backwards compatibility backlogs if you want. Now, in terms of using this, I've only used this on a couple of games, and only one really. Technically two. The controls are fine. I love the second analog stick, although after playing a PSP for so long, it's weird. I keep forgetting that there is a analog stick down there. I keep wanting to use the face buttons to like move the camera because I'm so used to that on such a small system. I have no idea why the PSP didn't have a second analog stick. That was such a dumb move. But thankfully, this has a second analog stick, and the controls, I would say, are fine. I'm not entirely happy with the face button controls, especially with like a fighting game like Tekken. It feels like, I don't want to say it feels like the worst controller you can use, but it feels like the bare minimum controller to use for a fighting game. Now, yes, you can actually hook up a PlayStation 4 controller to this thing and just use this as like a screen while you use the controller. So it's not like it's the only way to play a video game if you want. I've seen people do some really crazy stuff, like having this run through TV, and so they're just on their couch basically playing the Vita with a DualShock 4 controller on their 70-inch big screen TV. Kind of defeats the purpose of a portable, but also getting that Nintendo Switch type deal to work with a Sony portable. So I will say the controls are a bit on the tiny side. Not a deal breaker, but just for my meaty hands, it's, I can't sit here for 5 hours playing it. Now, in terms of looking back at like why this thing wasn't as successful as the PSP, which sold like 88 million units, this only sold 15 million. I think one of the reasons was there were too many things in this that were kind of unnecessary. Like, yeah, the front and back facing camera, I get having a camera on here, but do we really need a front facing camera as well? Like, that probably could have saved on the cost. Another thing was the real touchpad. Like, granted, I have not played this thing for very long, but I've yet to find a use for the real touchpad. And I'm sure that raised the price a little bit. But probably the one thing that made the least amount of sense was the proprietary memory cards. Those things probably were the biggest deal breaker to most people, because those things were just ridiculously expensive. Now these days, you can get 4 gig for about $16, but a 32 gig you're still going to pay $100 to this day, 10 years later. And, like, that was the biggest deal breaker for me. That was the biggest deal breaker for a lot of people. It's like, wait, so I have to pay $300 for the handheld and another $100 for the memory card, which I absolutely need. Yeah, no thank you. Now, you may notice that this is not the PS Vita 1000, this is the PS Vita 2000. This is the non-OLED version, and I specifically went for this version because, one, as much as I wanted to play the OLED, this had a gig of internal memory, which is nice, especially if you want to jailbreak this. But the other reason, and this one is such a big reason for me now, it's silly, I went with the LCD screen over the OLED screen. As much as I like the idea of OLED, the OLED screen has a proprietary charging cord that you need a special charging cord to charge the system. And I have so many fucking cords in my studio, I do not need another one. And when I found out that the PlayStation 2000, or the PlayStation Vita 2000 had a micro USB charging cord where you can literally just use a cell phone charger to charge this, it's like, okay, I'm sold. Like, that's what I want. I was more interested in the easier charging than the OLED screen. Now, I'm sure someone made like a charging cord or something that would work with that, but just, like, I don't want to deal with that. And also, this has a longer battery life than the OLED, and, like, working on this, I'm glad I went with this one, because, man, the battery does run out faster than you'd think. So, just keep that in mind when deciding to get one. If you do, really consider the PlayStation Vita 2000, simply because the battery will last a little bit longer because it's not as advanced of a screen. And yeah, you say right now you want the prettier OLED screen, but trust me, once you have it, you're going to be going like, man, I probably should have gone with the one that lasts a little longer. Because this thing does run out of juice quick. Another reason why I think this failed is because after like a year or two, they announced all first-party studios are not going to make anything for the Vita anymore. And I'm just like, wait, what? Like, seriously? Like, that was like the writing on the wall that this was going to fail. But also, like, there's a great video online, I would recommend you check it out, from Modern Finished Gamer, where he talks about how this thing, they want it to be like a security nightmare for hackers and jailbreakers. And some idiot forgot to change, like, the base code from 0000, which is like when you create something, it's everything starts off 000, then you have to change the base code, and they forgot to do that. So, like, this was jailbroken like day one. And if they had just done that, it would have been like a decade before anyone was able to jailbreak this. So that's unfortunate, but kind of funny, and probably what led to them giving up on the Vita so quick. I'll link the video in the description down below. It's kind of a fun video to watch. Now, one of the big reasons why I got this is because this thing is now, at the time of this recording, super easy to hack. I mean, insanely easy. Like, a child could do this. And you just have to go to a website and then click on the prompt like, yeah, jailbreak my Vita. And then hit OK, and voila, you have a jailbroken Vita. And it doesn't destroy anything because, one, there's like no security on this handheld anymore. Like, Sony doesn't really care as long as you're not cheating on achievements and on online multiplayer. You're kind of fine. And besides, depending on what you do with the jailbroken one, you don't have to worry, because like, I want to jailbreak this for a couple reasons. One, the memory card. I had no interest in trying to hunt down one of those proprietary tech memory cards, but with a specific little hack that is so easy to do, you can make it so that this uses basic micro SD cards. And so you can increase the storage of this up to like 1 terabyte if you want to. Now, doing that, you have to rely on digital games. You can't use the port, the game cartridge port at the same time you're using that, unless you get one of the 3G models, or like one of the wireless 3G models, because in those there's the like special like adapter. You have to take the system apart, and you can take that out and have the SD card go into there, so you can still use the game card port. But that is for more advanced models and hackers and whatnot. This is not that. This is just the standard using the game cartridge slot to have an expanded memory. And I kind of reserve myself like, yeah, this is going to be a digital console only. So if you're all about physical, keep that in mind. But another reason why I want to jailbreak this is because of the homebrew community. Now, there are mad lads to this day still making new games for this on the homebrew community. They're not official releases, but like every couple of weeks you see a new Metroidvania side-scroller made from scratch released on this console. So even though the Vita's dead, the Vita is still alive because the community keeps reanimating this corpse, and they keep shoving new games on here. But not only new games, but like unofficial ports of games that were never supposed to run on here. Not emulated games. Ports. Someone ported PlayStation, like someone ported Grand Theft Auto, the original trilogy, on this thing. This isn't running through an emulator like RetroArch. These are Vita ports that they made. It is insane. Some of the ports that people have made for this thing is truly mind-blowing. Someone made a port of Doom 3 on here, which is like just so this thing can run even an Xbox original game. Not the Doom 3 Xbox port, but just that came out on the Xbox, so you understand what I'm saying. Now, yes, you can pirate a shit ton of games here. That's not advised. It's illegal. I do feel though that in terms of pirating, there are some games that I think should have a serious discussion on being allowed to be pirated. Like case in point, I don't think anyone should be able to pirate the brand new Resident Evil 4 remake because it's available digitally on Xbox, PC, PlayStation, physically. Like, there are ways you can get it. But a game like PsyOps The Mindgate Conspiracy, unless you have one of the old systems, there's no way you can play this. They aren't selling it anymore. There's no new physical copies. It's not being sold digitally anywhere. And so, like, honestly, at that point, I think a person should be allowed to pirate this, since it's not being sold or available anywhere. Like, the rights holders clearly aren't making money off it right now. So, now granted, I'm not saying that's carte blanche to go do it, but, like, I think there should be a discussion on some games should be allowed to be pirated. And also, another thing that I think should be allowed are games that have been delisted, like the Dead Space Android game has been delisted. EA is not making money off it anymore. They are not offering it anymore. The only way to get that game is to pirate it off the internet and have it running on emulator. Like, honestly, how are you breaking the law if it's not available anywhere? Now, granted, I'm not saying go out and pirate discontinued games, but, I mean, it's just, I think there should be an honest conversation about piracy. And so, like, with this, you can pirate a shit ton of games if you want to. You can pirate all PS1, PSP, PS Vita games, and a shit ton of Android games as well that have been discontinued and are no longer available. Like Mass Effect, the Mass Effect Android game, the Battlefield Bad Company Android game, Dead Space Android. And so, with that, like, that is kind of a cool thing you can do with this. That kind of leads to kind of the whole pirated game homebrew community where there's a series of handhelds called the Amaric or the Amaric. They're basically these like custom made like little handheld gaming emulator systems that you can put RetroArch on, and basically you can play Nintendo 64, you can play Genesis, Sega Master, Dreamcast. You can play basically everything before the PlayStation 2, and for like $100 to $170, a good SD card and some time on these, you can turn into serious gaming handheld emulators. But here's the thing. Apart from like some of the newer ones that you can actually do PlayStation 2 and GameCube, like this thing blows them all out of the water, because not only can this emulate all of those old classic Nintendo and Sega games, but it also can do Vita, which the Amrex can't really do at the time of this recording. They might come out with a new model like the day after this gets posted, I don't know. But so, like, if you're really interested in getting, like, a handheld to do all of those old classic games, look at getting a Vita, because you're going to be getting a little bit more options with the Vita, with only a little bit more effort. You have to go to a website and click OK to jailbreak this to turn it into basically what Amaric can do. And so, like, that's kind of impressive. I'm not saying for you to steal video games online, people. I'm just saying if you're into that lifestyle and making backups of the games you already own, then go do that. No, there are people, they do stay legit and they do like to have backups, you know, whatnot, but it's a whole other thing. But the other reason why I want to jailbreak this, and I have jailbroken it, is for remote play. Now, something that's really, really fucking annoying is that the PlayStation 5 will remote play on a freaking phone. Okay? I can remote the PlayStation 5 on a phone, which is considerably less demanding or less powerful than my PlayStation Vita, but I cannot remote play on the PlayStation Vita from the PlayStation 5. Even though this has all the buttons required to do so. However, by jailbreaking this, there's a couple of options that will allow you to remote play PlayStation 5 onto the PlayStation Vita. Now, the Chai-Keen like program that you can put on this did make it. They did update it so that it doesn't work anymore. So it's kind of like a fluid thing. I haven't been able to remote play a PS5 on here yet, but it is one of my goals. I do plan on remote playing a PS5 on here once some mad lad figures out a way to get the Chai-Keen thing to work, because you can remote play on here. It's been done. Just Sony are being, you know, assholes about it. So, I would rather remote play on this than that new Project Q that they're working on. So, anyway, the PlayStation Vita, a lot of people like to make fun of it, how it was a failed console and it's not a good handheld, but honestly, this is a really cool little thing. It's the device that keeps kicking because people are still making shit for this. To this day, they're still releasing homebrew games on here, originally made. I mean, are they the best? No, but you're still getting brand new games on here, and so the community for the Vita is so freaking dedicated. Like, it is impressive. Hands out to you guys. And so if you want to be part of that community, it's really easy. If you have a Vita, you need a Vita. But yeah, just you go to this website and you click enter. And yeah, there's a couple of hoops you have to get through to get internet to work again, because by jailbreaking this, you have to go back a previous like firmware system, and the internet doesn't like working on that firmware. So unless you're using like the homebrew community page thing, you know, it won't work. So yeah, like the Vita DB downloader, where you could get kind of old emulators and whatnot, and those ports and those homebrew games. But I mean, there's the PS4 and PS3 remote play, so if you have a PlayStation 4, any game on a PlayStation 4 can be remote played through this. And it's pretty awesome, especially if you get one of those little attachments that let you have an R2 and L2 button, so you can really enjoy remote play that way. So I think this is a really nifty little system. I'm glad I have one, and like, yeah, I don't see myself getting rid of this thing anytime soon. It's pretty neat. So anyway, that's been kind of my review or retrospective of the PlayStation Vita. I look forward to doing plenty of game reviews and hour plays on this thing for you guys. My name's Christopher Ricardo with 11 Hour Reviews, and that will be all for today.